everybody, welcome back to today's show. And this episode we'll be talking about carbon emissions, a very important topic in ESG. And today I'd like to first thank all of you for coming today and attending this session from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of i-Chem Solution. And today we've got a very special guest with us, Ms Kong Bei Ji from Gecko Technologies, who is an ESG partner of i-Chem Solution, providing solutions for carbon emissions calculations and anything related to carbon emissions.
Hi everyone, I'm Bei Ji. I represent Gecko Technologies. Basically, we are a data analytics and solution firm. Currently, our focus is to help Malaysia, like all the countries, solutions to reach net zero 2050, which target is net zero 2050, which target is
Yes. So without further ado, let's start the interview. So, are we ready to start? I got the cue. So, Bei Ji, let me ask you the first question. For the benefit of our viewers who may not be into or knowledgeable about carbon emissions, could you explain in layman terms what are carbon emissions and greenhouse gases?
So, first of all, I think I want to start by explaining two terms that we see and we hear actually either from radio, from news, from newspapers, from newspaper every day. Greenhouse gas emissions, GHG emissions, and carbon emissions. Now, actually, greenhouse gas, we know what it is. It refers to gases that are currently in our atmosphere that traps heat, that contributes to global warming and all the consequences from global warming. Carbon emissions, as the name implies, carbon dioxide emissions. Now, the thing is, because of our current agenda and our mission to net zero, carbon emissions actually means carbon equivalent emissions. It includes up to 7 types of greenhouse gases. To name a few, we have CO2, methane gas, we have sulfurous and nitrous components, and of course we have HCFs. So, just want to make this clear, if you see this term carbon emissions from now onwards, I want you to understand it as an equivalent term to greenhouse gas emissions that covers the three gases, not just carbon dioxide.
No, I like to think of it as greenhouse gases because greenhouse effect. Because what's a greenhouse? Greenhouse is a glass house that allows people in cold climates to grow more temperate, crops that require temperate climates. So because of warming inside the glass house, because the light reflected from the sun makes everything inside warmer, even though the outside can be cold. And it just so happens that climate change is making our Earth warmer the same way.
Yes.
So, next question. Why do governments and companies care so much about reducing carbon emissions?
That's a very good question. Now, with everything, I always believe there are always at least two different schools of thoughts. So, some people are doing this, they're genuinely trying to reduce their carbon equivalent emissions. Number one, because of the consequences they see firsthand around. Let's just talk about the picture. Let's just talk about the last 3 years, what has happened to our country in the last 3 years. Do I need to talk about floods? Right? If you recall, in the last 2 years, in our west coast, in Klang Valley and states normally we are not as affected by floods during the monsoon season, we had at least 2 severe floods in the same span of 6 months, if I recall. I'm sure you recall too. A lot of us have lost our homes, right? Especially the underprivileged ones. Now, if you've witnessed that firsthand, and worse, if you are one of the people who are affected, or if you see your close friends and family being affected, for sure you will be thinking, why is this happening to our country all of a sudden? Such extreme climate change in the last 3 years. Global warming. That's one motivation by people to engage in this mission towards net zero and 2050. Now, apart from that, of course, some of us are just regulatory experts, like us, because there are multiple motivations, but let's talk about the most important. So in Malaysia, especially the Paris agreement in 2015. What it meant was, we as a country, we aspire, we aim to reach net zero, meaning zero carbon emissions, by 2050, or at least starting from 2050. So since then, our government have a few policies, like strict policies, or the lenient frameworks and recommendations that mandates banks, public listed companies, and guides SMEs towards calculating their emissions and eventually reducing their emissions. Now, what's the consequence of not complying with these? I mean, that's a consequence. I'm sure we are hearing carbon tax a lot these days. Is it coming or not? Maybe later I'll address that. Now, we talk about regulatory consequence. The first one would be Bursa Malaysia, or the public listed companies. It's in their listing requirements, starting this year, that you must disclose every single figure of your company's carbon performance. So there you go. That's, I think, the main motivations of why people are serious in doing this.
You bring up a very good point about Paris Agreement and goal in 2020. Actually, one of my questions I was going to ask you, but coming back to the basics, could you explain for benefit of our listeners what Scope 1 and Scope 2 and Scope 3 are?
How many types of carbon emissions are there? We call them categories, right? It's just a way for you to see the sources of it. The main standards that we align to is something called ESG Partner, as categorized for us. Scope 1 is your direct emissions, directly from things you own as a company. For example, the fuels you burn in the factory, emissions from vehicles you own as a company, or refrigerants used in your equipment owned by you. So this case as ownership, right? Because you have decided to purchase and utilize such equipment, you are directly responsible for carbon emissions coming out from these sources. That's Scope 1. Next, you have Scope 2. It's just electricity, right? How is your electricity generated? Even if you're not one who's generating electricity, you have made the decision to purchase electricity that is generated in such a way, perhaps it is not that healthy for our environment. That's also a new Scope 2. Then we come to Scope 3, which is something that we want you to be aware of your own supply chain. Scope 3 are emissions contributed by not you, but your upstream suppliers all the way to your downstream clients. Now, you might be thinking, why are you responsible for this? You might not be, but I want you, the main driver, to perhaps educate your suppliers and clients where necessary to guide them towards perhaps using a different process to manufacture your raw materials or using the products you develop in a more efficient way so that every party involved, like you as a manufacturer, the suppliers who supply materials to you, and your clients who buy products from you, we are all equally responsible in using things in the most efficient way to lower your carbon emissions. That is Scope 3.
Thank you very much for the concise explanation about Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. So you told me what Scope 1 and 2 and 3 emissions are. So where should we start when we want to tackle the issue of carbon emissions, high carbon emissions? Where should we start?
Great question. The hardest part is always to start something. I would recommend you to start from things you are directly responsible and you have direct control. That's the most important thing. So today, if you've heard what I talked about, SWOT to Scope 3, I'm sure you will feel overwhelmed. From the start, you don't know how to start. You will think, hey, these things are not something I have control over. You can't expect me to, monitor these. So I recommend you start from Scope 1. Things you own, fuels you yourself, vehicles you own, and refrigerants, cooling equipment you own. keyword here again is ownership and direct accountability. Now, how do you start getting numbers? To be honest, there are various resources out there. Some are as simple as estimation. Right? So, for example, if you have a certain air conditioner model from a specific manufacturer, right, in Malaysia, manufacturing in Malaysia, in certain materials, you get an estimate from industry averages that tells you if you use your aircon for how many days per week in a year, you are estimated to emit this certain amount of carbon emissions. So that's how you start. Estimate the things emitted by things you know.
Okay, so forget what you're saying. So start with what you can, things that you are personally liable for.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so could you explain, I mean, you talked a bit already about Malaysia's goal for being carbon neutral by 2020 and net zero by 2050. So, could you tell us who's in charge of monitoring our progress, Malaysia's progress as a whole, towards Paris Agreement?
Okay, I have two keywords I feel I need to explain the difference first. Carbon neutrality by 2030 and net zero by 2050. Okay, now. Carbon neutrality means today you have calculated, you are aware of the amount of emissions you produce. Let's just say a ballpark value, let's say 10,000. Okay, just an example. What are you going to do with this 10,000? You should, if you are encouraged to first maybe purchase carbon credits to offset 10,000 emissions you have produced. What is a carbon credit? They are simply a certificate, right? A mechanism of price, of course, you pay for these certificates in the form of this business cost. You will then offset, you will eliminate your emissions in this way. It's like a trading mechanism. If you don't have available technology today yet to completely eliminate your own carbon emissions, then perhaps you should pay, right? You should pay for a certificate as a business cost. The reason why carbon neutrality exists and why most countries are starting with this mindset first is to at least let you as a business owner, regardless of what size or industry you're in, to be aware, to be alert of the cost. It's an additional cost to pay just to offset your emissions. I'm sure as business owners, our main driver is cost. If you see your cost rising, you'll be motivated to do something. Oh no, I guess I should reduce my carbon emissions so I can reduce this carbon credit cost. Now that is how you eventually move to a true net zero mechanism, where you be active, right? You make active decisions in either enhancing your manufacturing process, you invest in technologies such as carbon capture, carbon storage technologies, that can truly turn your carbon emissions into zero. And the longer done by you so that's carbon neutrality and net zero. So for Malaysia, since we have pledged to Paris Agreement, right? Paris Agreement tells everybody to aim towards net zero by 2050. But does that really mean we can do it? I think I personally, I have received this question and I've lost count. Can we really do it? So that's why we say we aim, right? We have committed to reducing our carbon intensity against our GDP by 45%. Let's start with 45%, maybe 100%. 45% from our 2005 baseline year. So we are committed to that. Us as a country, we have set our own targets. Targets we think it's reasonable for us to reach, right? Things we think it's meaningful for our manufacturers and business owners this year to adapt to. So we have that. We also have another commitment that requires all of us to have at least 31% of our electricity to be purchased from renewable resources. This was to be achieved by 2025, very soon actually. Yeah. Which is why we've seen a lot of people, right, coming with solar panels, encouraging this transition. I'm sure you're very familiar.
Yeah.
Yes. the third commitment we've made is to, of course, achieve carbon neutrality as soon as 2050. So that is what's going on in Malaysia. If you look at other countries, sure, they do have different targets. Let's just say Singapore, right? They have reduced their carbon emissions by a lot more. If you look at other countries, perhaps they have very specific policies that requires, let's say, reductions only in the mining industry, right? Let's say 70%. Another country who's heavy in, let's say, the energy sector will require 80% transition to renewable resources. So you see, I'm giving you different numbers to show you that different countries have given the authority by the United Nations through a mechanism called NDC, Nationally Determined Contribution. You know your country the best. You should set your own targets. And you roll out your own policies, you enforce it using your own way.
So is Malaysia on path to achieving our own NDCs?
Actually, yes. I was just looking through some database just a few weeks ago. I came across this United Nations endorsed database called Climate Watch. Basically, they would like every country's climate performance over the last more than 20 years. And they were benchmarking against all the countries involved in climate action. So actually, Malaysia, right, we have reduced as much as 50% of our emissions intensity against our GDP from 2005 to 2020. We've actually reduced a lot. Yeah, it's fantastic actually. So you can tell that the policies we've rolled out in the last 10 years, although they're very difficult to adapt to, they are meaningful.
Very effective from what it seems. Yeah. So thank you for the explanation about our commitment towards the Paris Agreement and our the timeline that we've set out to achieve these NDCs and how our progress has been. So going back to talking about some perhaps basic mundane things, do you need any sophisticated hardware or equipment to accurately monitor your carbon emissions that you're producing in your company or your organization?
Great question. You don't need, I wouldn't say you need sophisticated software just to start, right? Because if you know Excel sheets, that's one of the most popular ways to go about when you calculate anything, right? You know what you're calculating, you should go to Excel first. So let me explain what is the average journey, right, of my client when I serve publicist company. Almost every single client I talk to, it will give me the same circumstance. So it's like this. When you're aware, when you've decided that you want to calculate the emissions by your company, and then I will give you my diagnosis, say the sector, the size of the property you're in, this is your situation, and your supply chain like this. I will give you a standardized data collection template that you can base off collect data. Right? It's all about collecting data. Then you go look at your database and you come back to me and say, oh, I see. These are the things I need. But I don't have these yet. I have only 70% of these. The other 30% is either somewhere in my files that I have not centralized yet, or I am simply not collecting yet. My supplier is not collecting it yet. My clients are not collecting it yet. I do not have the data today. Then we can only start with estimations. During your first year, when you try to calculate GHG emissions, you will have certain things you have to estimate. Because there are certain things when your data is ready, you will calculate using our sophisticated software with the highest efficiency.
So what you're saying is you don't actually, initially you don't actually need all sophisticated hardware ready and get-go. You can work with estimations first.
Right. So obviously it's a continuous process. You will get estimations and then you have to continuously enhance your data collection capabilities. So we have to work hand in hand with you to tell you, to guide you towards an accurate measurement.
Thank you, Bei Ji. And because we're slightly short on time, I'd just like to rush through a few of these questions. Is the separate GHG or greenhouse gas report required if you're already planning to make a comprehensive sustainability/ESG report?
Well, GHG reports, a lot of people have asked me about this. Now, a GHG report is essentially a report, right? It can have a lot of pages, just a sheet of tables summarizing the key numbers we know. How much carbon dioxide emitted, how much nitrous oxide emitted for your company, for your subsidiary, maybe even down to your product level if you are manufacturing. So this is a GHG report. It needs to be in a certain format to be able to provide you the level of detail of big and small numbers you need, so you can insert annual reports. Then this annual report could be annual report required by Busan Malaysia if you're a PLC, or it could be simply carbon footprint reports to your suppliers or your trading partners or investors that you might to see to analyze your performance. In short, yes, a GHG report is required.
Thank you for your answer. Because I also get the question, why do you take this separate GHG report? We've already got an ESG report on the way in the works. So that answers it. Thank you. So for our last question today, we talked about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and it's all big and big hassle. But I've been hearing about scope 4. Could you tell us a bit about scope 4?
Wow, scope 4, you didn't hear about it. So previously I have said scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Now there's scope 4. It is called avoided emissions. I'll give you a very simple example. So, unfortunately today we are going to okay, so let's say the next time you are thinking of attending an interview, maybe you are considering to not travel to the office but have a teleconferencing method. So now, if you travel from Selangor to KL, let's say 35 km one way, by car, that's standard Malaysian cars, you would have emitted roughly 6 kilograms of carbon emissions if you choose to do that. But if you choose to stay at home and conduct your interview through Zoom, you would have avoided that. See, your carbon emissions is effectively zero if you choose that alternative. So it's an avoided emission if you chose an alternate method of conducting your day-to-day tasks. So now, the reason why it's not being enforced now is because we are still waiting for guiding standards. I would say, right, in my opinion, there are currently 3 very important bottlenecks as to why we cannot do scope 4 properly yet. Number 1, there's difficulty in setting a baseline. Number 2, standards really tell you what is considered avoided, what is not. And third, if you are currently working in the math or science industry, I think you would agree with that. Before you start calculating anything, you need to define your system boundary. So at the moment, we do not have standards that tells us how to set boundaries.
So there's still a lot of, we're still in the dark how we standardize everything.
Correct.
Which is perhaps a good thing because people are already struggling to keep up with even scope 1 and scope 2.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. So I think it's a silver lining that we're not forced to talk about scope 4 as of yet. So
but
that's
it's good to be aware.
it is very good. So that's all the time we have today for the questions from myself. Before I open up the Q&A section, I would like everyone to click on the link below to get a free one-to-one consultation from our consultants here at i-Chem Solution. Please click on the link below and also sign up for our, not just our one-to-one consultation, but also for our Telegram group, which you can find the link to down below as well. Join the Telegram group to learn more about ESG every week. Okay, so now I'd like to open up the floor to questions from people watching now. So, for any questions, please, I'll be looking at them now to ask Ms. Bei Ji. So for the first question we have, let's see. When will Malaysia start imposing carbon tax?
Very good question. I like how good questions are continuously coming from you guys. Malaysia, as at last year, our Prime Minister did say that we are not rolling out a carbon tax anytime soon, but we are looking into it. We are considering it. However, what's worth mentioning is that Sarawak is a state itself, right? Their own state cabinet, they've taken the autonomy to pass their own environment bill, which we passed last year. So actually for Sarawak, their own state, they have their own system similar to carbon tax. They call it carbon rebate. That is still in the process of finalization. In short, while we do not have carbon tax as a country in Malaysia, but Sarawak is looking into it very soon.
Sarawak will be the first state in Malaysia probably to issue a carbon tax. Quite exciting for the state.
But it only applies to businesses registered in Sarawak.
Noted. So thank you for the answer. Another question from the floor. If a car owned by a company is being used outside of working hours for personal use of the employee, does it still count as Scope 1 emissions?
Car owned by the company.
The car is owned by the company,
Okay.
but it's being used by the employee for his own personal use and his own personal reasons. Does it still count as Scope 1 emissions for the company?
Unfortunately or fortunately, yes, car is Scope 1. Because that car belongs to your company. It's your responsibility to do apps. And you go and some standards and say, employee cannot use this for personal use.
That's a good point. That's a good point. So moving forward, when carbon emissions restrictions get tighter, perhaps this is something that company car owners need to look into. So why does Bursa only require Malaysian companies to report on just a few of the Scope 3 items? Isn't it being too lenient? And if so, when will it change?
For the requirement for financial year ending December this year and onwards, Bursa has listed that at least, for Scope 2, at least also Scope 3, just two categories. To start with, category 6 is business travel, category 7 is employee commute. Reason why they only mandate for this two and not for 15 categories is they want you to start with a more relaxing way. And also, different businesses actually have different material consequences in different categories. What it means is that, for example, if you are a manufacturer, you would probably only have a few that's relevant to you. For example, manufacturing processes, purchase rules from the supplier, distribution to the client. But if you're a digital service company, you don't have any of these. You probably only have category 6 and 7, and perhaps franchises if it's applicable. So yeah, they've started with just a minimal list of requirements because these are common things for all businesses. But moving forward, there will need to be tailored solutions for different businesses, and that's becoming.
And I think it's a good thing because it makes things easier for all companies to start reporting rather than requiring for everything that's applicable to their businesses at this point. So next question. If a company owner has an EV car, is this carbon reduction under Scope 1, Scope 2 or Scope 3?
A carbon reduction actually is the offset. So when we call it an offset, it's actually a total number that will be subtracted against a grand total after you have calculated all scores into Scope 3, will then be subtracted at the end. That we consider as a technology for carbon reduction. So yeah, if you're talking about emissions emitted by your EV vehicle, and EV runs on electricity, and as I know it's not zero, but it is super close to zero. So if you ask me about that, then it's not relevant. There's no emissions.
So if the EV car is replacing, say, a diesel engine car or petrol engine car, and the petrol engine car will initially be classified under Scope 1, So that we in scope 1, my use of EV card. Okay, so that answers the question. And what do you foresee Malaysia becoming like the European Union countries in terms of its aggressiveness in reducing carbon emissions from industries?
Aggressiveness. I would think is there's subjectivity in this. So if we were to start comparing to, let's say, the EU, right? They have a lot of standards and a lot of policies. It's very robust because they have begun many years ago. Only because they are huge in the international trade stage. Right? They have a lot of trading partners with a lot of different countries, which has a huge contribution to their economic value. So that's that. That's why they have to be more aggressive than us. Not just us, but basically most of us in Southeast Asia. Us, when we look at our own economic data, right, the type of international trade partners we have, the type of industries locally is contributing the most for emissions. It's a fun fact, right? Our biggest contributor is energy, right? Electricity and heat generation. It's our first contributor. Second big is transportation. Third biggest will be industrial and construction. So, because of this, at the moment, we only have stringent policies in place for these few sectors. In a way, you can say it's less expensive, but it's better.
So, okay, I think that's all the time we have today for questions from the floor. So thank you everyone for tuning in and watching the show, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for today.